I really feel that expression of emotions. Okay, expressions of emotions is not only a human right, but it's also a God-given right. One can express himself or herself in whatever way, for whatever reason. There are those who feel that Chebukati did Kenyans in. They feel that Chebukati sabotaged their democratic process. Those are not happy. Certainly, they can't be happy with such feelings. There are also those, on the other hand, who feel that Chebukati did also satisfy democratic rights of Kenyans. To them, he is a hero. To the others, he's a villain. I'm there. I feel that whoever feels whatever, those emotions, you are entitled to yours. We can only say pole sana, now that he's gone, unfortunately. And to some people, he doesn't deserve any orchids or flowers. And also remember, you are a man, a living man today. You can talk. You can say whatever you would want to say. But when death calls, dead men tell no tales. I have a very strong feeling ya kwamba Baba, to begin with, Baba still remains the best suited Africa Union chair. Baba is the best African Union leader after Ghana's Osiagefo, Kwame Nkrumah. Baba is Kenya's Africanist with the right mind for Africa. Baba's heart beats for Africa. The Africanist he is, unfortunately, is Baba's Achilles heel. Neocolonialists are the bane of Africa. Baba being an Africanist, an Africanist by excellence, as I said, his heart beating for Africa is the reality. And that is the reason why I insist he still remains the best option to lead Africa. Unfortunately, him being such a great Africanist could not secure the votes of African leaders. In this sense, the same old colonial forces that have always united against Africa to still destabilize Africa, the same forces that over a period of time have overthrown democratically elected governments in Africa, sponsored the overthrow of the Osiagefo in Ghana, simply because Nkrumah was championing the uniting of Africa and rallying Africa to unite and create a one united African government running its affairs, unlike now, or unlike today, where Africa remains fragmented, disjointed, manipulated, exploited, and continuing to be run and exploited from the LC Palace in Paris, White House, and Whitehall in London. I knew Baba is done the moment he took the podium at Africa's capital, Ethiopia. And he said he's going to work for Africa, Africa's unity, and he's going to fight so that the natural resources for Africa benefits Africans. And the benefits and the natural resources should be Africa's. The moment, or the second, Baba raised the above issue, France raised its antennae higher. French intelligence ordered to make sure that Baba does not clinch the African Union seat. And this happens so easily because France has such a stronghold in most of the West African countries, though even some in East Africa are usually influenced by France, using its economic might and of course its own forces to manipulate the way African countries will make decisions regarding anything that might interfere with the so-called interests of Europeans. If you can remember, this happened to this country when Amina Mohammed was also sponsored by Kenya to go fight for the same position as Baba's. But the same forces from Wazungu destabilized the efforts of Amina Mohammed, even using our own neighbors. They were manipulated. In actual fact, one of the countries in East Africa was forced not to vote for Amina Mohammed simply because they wanted a pipeline for their oil, and at the same time the company that was exploiting or was to exploit that natural resource, oil, was a French company. Sanctions were put, and the moment those sanctions were put forward, the African country was asked, if you want us to go ahead with exploitation of your oil and the transportation of your oil to the sea, then you must influence other East African countries not to support the candidature of Amina Mohammed. It is the same picture, the same countries. I once again say Baba was the right candidate for AUC. But again, if you look at the interests these Wazungus have in Africa, those interests cannot, that is the Wazungu interest, not our interest, the Wazungu interest. They cannot be allowed to be deviated, or maybe an attempt made to stop them by any leader, whatever the leader is, either an African Union chair or even a leader of an African country. They will always sabotage that leadership. in one way or the other. If you come back to our local issues that affected Baba's not getting that position, you will see that we had so many things running against Baba. Because first and foremost, he who was sponsoring him, he who was selling him, they made very poor salespeople, maybe even incompetent in selling Baba. The salesman, the sponsor, was the undoing of Baba. Our country's effort to sell Baba was somewhat dishonest. And I might say it was a kind of a game, a play game, in the image of what we call today Kalongolongo and Piki Piki Ponki. Number one, the very person sponsoring Baba, the same person trying to sell Baba, is the same person who just a couple of months back wrote and called African leaders to sack Baba when Baba was the Africa's high representative of infrastructure. Those same leaders who sacked him, who asked to sack him, now you turn back to them and tell them this is a good leader. And the reason why you're asking them to sack him is because he was sabotaging your government. And again you come and say now he's a good guy. You can take this guy. I seriously think that was a terrible mistake, because those are the same people who are going to vote. And those are the same people you said or told them that Baba is not fit to be a leader. If you look at Uganda, for example, our neighbor, there was a public show of endorsing Baba, but when it came to voting, we did not see the efforts they made. They never even made any efforts trying to sell Baba to other leaders so that those leaders can vote for Baba. They could not also be able to do that because the same country or the same leader, the leader of that country that publicly endorsed Baba, he himself is brutalizing his own citizens. How do you go convincing other African leaders to support you? That means so many other African countries refuse to walk into Kenya's glaring deceit and lies of democratic principles, yet at the same time abducting its young population. Those things could not be reconciled by other African leaders. It could not be possible to convince other African leaders to support Baba. If you look at Kenya's diplomatic efforts while trying to sell Baba, you will see that this was a terrible mistake, because while we were campaigning for Baba, our country was taking sides in what was happening in the Middle East, especially Palestine. We should not have taken sides, because the moment we do that, The Muslim countries in Africa surely took offense in our diplomatic position. This support of Israel was a source of annoyance, chagrin to Muslims, not only in Africa, but worldwide. There is even a rumor, how true that is, I don't know, that the person initially who was wanted by Africa was the retired president, Uhuru Kenyatta. Meaning, then those countries, African countries, who are ready to support retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, were not happy with his replacement. Especially so as the Great Lakes envoy. It was the feeling of South African Development Corporation opinion that Uhuru Kenyatta ran for AUC chair. But unfortunately, he wasn't recommended nor sponsored by Kenya. We have had some diplomatic tiffs with other African countries, like what is happening in Sudan, DRC. All those small little things did not work for Baba's election. And this was not a small thing. If you can remember, when last year we had Africa Summit in Beijing, Kenya tried to make arrangement of a breakfast meeting for African leaders so that they could be wooed into supporting Baba's running. But the meeting failed. African leaders felt that such a meeting ought to be held in an African country, or African soil for that matter, and not in a foreign land. In a foreign land, meeting for African leaders to discuss domestic matters. Africans or African leaders did not take that kindly diplomatically. There is the problem also of Pretoria. Pretoria feels that Kenya is supporting Rwanda to destabilize Congo, where South Africa's soldiers were killed by M23. And then, curiously, the other day, just before the voting, Burundi was crying that Rwanda was about to do a Putin-like in Ukraine, in Burundi, where we have a significant Tutsi population. Unfortunately, diplomatically, MDVD launched a multitude of joyriders as diplomats to sell Baba. People who aren't trained in diplomacy, nor experienced in matters diplomacy, but showmanship. Diplomatically, we were not able to sell Baba. In case of Mama, our neighbor, her country felt slighted by the choice of Baba man replacing Uhuru Kenyatta. Tanzania then expected, if UK has been replaced, then they should have their own retired president, JMK, Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, to bear the torch for East African community. So, if UK is confronted by his country, then Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete ought to take that position. If you go to our neighbor again, Uganda, matters were not good either for Baba. Because the leader there wants his son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, to succeed him. But in Uganda, Baba's friend is Kiza Besigye. How does Uganda support Baba in such a scenario? If you go to the Republic of South Africa, the same case. Ramaphosa feels that Baba Man is a friend to Julius Malema. And if you can remember, Baba went to South Africa, stayed 3 days, waiting to meet Ramaphosa, all in vain. That meeting was never realized. Come to West Africa. When Burkina Faso's Traore overthrew his government, Burkina Faso's government, and he seized the power, Kenya was the first country to condemn Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's changeover from civilian to military by the current president, Traore. If you can remember the Ghana inauguration, Traore cheekily poked at Kenya, that Kenya tries to to pride itself of being democratic, yet at the same time it is running after its own children. If you look at all these factors, you can see that so many things went haywire. So many things were against Baba's effort to be Africa's chair. If you look at one of the major things or principles, actually it is the preamble of the African Union Charter: non-interference with the internal affairs of a neighboring country. Look at what we are doing. We are even not only inviting, but also embracing rebels, Janjaweed rebels from Southern Sudan. From Sudan, not Southern Sudan. Some fellows destabilizing Southern Sudan have also been welcomed in this country. All these things did play against Baba's efforts to be Africa's chair. Thank you so much.
Mixed reaction. People are celebrating Chebukati's death.